While I was saving homes for others, mine was sold behind my back. I was halfway through writing a grant proposal for a shelter project in Ghent when my phone lit up. A video message from Rachel. I smiled instinctively. She always found the most absurd dog videos to cheer me up on heavy days. But when I tapped the screen, her face was different this time. Pale. Eyes wide. Voice trembling. "Please tell me you signed off on the house sale," she said, "because your childhood home, it's gone." I didn't understand. I froze, blinking at the screen like she'd spoken in another language. "My childhood home?" I replayed the message. Watched her lips form the same sentence again. "It's gone." The words thudded in my chest. I stood up so quickly my chair tipped behind me. I opened my laptop, hands already shaking, and typed the address I knew better than my own reflection. 24 Lancaster Drive, my grandmother's house, my house, Clara's house. The screen loaded with a single word: sold, 6 weeks ago. My heart stopped. No one had called. No email, no letter. I scrolled down and found the digital documents: sale agreement, closing signature, power of attorney. The signature on the bottom, my name. Except, it wasn't my signature. The M curved too neatly. The loops were wrong. Too smooth, too. Manufactured. I'd signed enough legal papers to know how my own pen moved. My throat went dry. I called Rachel. "Where did you see this?" She sounded breathless. "I was browsing Zillow, just randomly looking through old neighborhoods. Then boom, Clara's house, listed. And by the time I clicked it again, it was already sold." "To who?" I asked, though I could barely hear myself speak. "Some company. Developers. They're filing permits to knock it down for townhomes." I didn't say anything. "Elena," she whispered, "you didn't know?" I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. My legs gave out and I sat on the edge of my bed, heart pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. Clara's voice echoed in my mind, gentle, steady, the way it always was when the world felt unsafe. "This house is yours, mi niña. I signed everything before you left. They may not understand, but one day they'll see." After she passed, I couldn't bear to live there. The grief was too thick. So I left for Belgium. But I never gave up the house, never signed anything. I let my parents stay because they were aging, and I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't think they'd give it away. Or that Daniel, my own brother, would sell it behind my back. That night, I packed my suitcase in silence. I booked the first flight home. I didn't call my parents. I didn't message Daniel. I just stared at the ticket, fists clenched around it like a promise. My house was gone, but so was their illusion that I wouldn't come back. They thought I'd moved on. They had no idea I'd come back stronger. And I wasn't just coming for the house. I was coming for the truth. The flight home felt longer than any I'd taken before. I couldn't sleep, couldn't read. Every bump of turbulence rattled not just my body, but my certainty. I stared out the window, the clouds thick like grief I thought I'd buried 5 years ago. When I landed, I didn't go home. I went to Clara. The cemetery was quiet, too quiet for a place holding so much pain. I walked past the rows of weathered stones until I reached hers, Clara Mendoza. Beloved mother, grandmother, and keeper of promises. I knelt, running my fingers along the carved letters. The stone was colder than I remembered. A single dandelion had grown at the base, fragile and alone. "I didn't forget," I whispered. "You gave me everything, the house, the memories, the strength." My throat tightened. I didn't realize I was crying until the tears blurred the name in front of me. I left the door open for them, Abuela. And they changed the locks. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of wet grass and something faintly floral, like her perfume. For a moment, I could almost feel her hand on my shoulder again, the way she used to comfort me after another cold dinner with my parents. She was the one who'd raised me with warmth. She'd cooked, told stories, patched up the wounds my family never saw. In her final weeks, I stayed with her, slept on the floor beside her bed. She made me promise. No matter what they say, the house is yours. I signed it all. It's filed. Trust the paper, if not the people. At the time, I didn't understand the urgency in her voice. I thought she was just being protective, as always. After she passed, I stayed a few more weeks. Then I left, not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. The house was too full of ghosts and silence. I needed space to grieve, to breathe. Belgium offered distance, not escape, but I kept the Martinez name. I never turned my back on my family. I just hoped one day they might turn toward me. I'd never planned to abandon the house. That's why I never sold it, never revoked the title. I kept paying the property tax from abroad, quietly, respectfully. I let my parents stay because it felt human, right. But now they'd erased me without a word. They'd chosen convenience over conscience. I stood brushing dirt from my knees, my eyes locked on the phrase carved at the base of her stone, the one she asked to include herself. Truth leaves a trail, even through silence. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of her grave, a quiet vow. Let's follow that trail, abuela, I murmured. You didn't raise me to lose, and I'm done being polite. When I pulled into the driveway, I half expected to wake up. The gate still creaked the same way. The fig tree in the corner still bent toward the east like it always had. But the soul of the place, Clara's presence, was missing. And so was the warmth. The house had been repainted a flat beige. My mother always hated beige. I wondered whose decision that was. I knocked. No one answered, so I let myself in with the spare key still hidden beneath the chipped owl statue on the porch. The same place it had always been. Inside, everything smelled like old tea and distance. My father sat in the armchair, watching golf. He barely looked up. So you're here, he said, as if I'd just stepped out to buy groceries 5 minutes ago. I waited for more, but it never came. I saw the records, I said. The house was sold, without me. He turned the volume down by a notch, not enough to be polite. You live in Europe. What did you expect? I expected a call, I snapped. A text, a signature request, anything. He shrugged. Daniel handled it. We trusted him. That word, trusted, rattled in my chest. I heard footsteps and turned. Daniel stood in the hallway, arms crossed, not even pretending to look surprised. Elena, he said, like my name tasted sour. Didn't think you'd show up in person. I ignored the venom in his voice. You sold Clara's house. He gave a low laugh. Correction, our house. You disappeared. You left it to us. I never gave up ownership. You left. You missed birthdays, holidays, family dinners. I cut him off. Clara gave me this house. She signed everything. I let you all live here because I thought you needed it. Not because I gave up my right. You've been gone for 5 years. And I've paid the taxes every year from Belgium, quietly, without asking for anything. He didn't deny it. He didn't have to. I pulled out my phone and opened the county property app. The documents say you used a power of attorney with my name on it, but I never signed anything authorizing you to sell the house. Daniel's jaw twitched. You signed that years ago, remember? Before you moved out of state. That was for Clara's pharmacy pickup when I was 19, I shot back. Not for selling real estate. Silence. I want to see the original. Paperwork, I said, stepping forward. Right now. He didn't move. My father stayed in his chair, watching the silence unfold like it was someone else's problem. I'm not asking for a fight, I said, quieter now. But I won't be erased. Daniel's voice was low, controlled. You already were. You just didn't notice. I stared at him. At the brother who once gave me piggyback rides in the backyard. The same boy who cried when Clara got sick. I didn't recognize this man in front of me. My mother emerged from the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel. She looked at me as if I were a neighbor asking to borrow sugar, not the daughter whose name was still on the title of this house. You changed, she said flatly. You're not like us anymore, I smiled bitterly. I'm proud of that. I left the house not out of weakness, but because I thought they'd honor her memory. Instead, they sold it like a leftover heirloom no one wanted. I walked out without another word, my fists clenched. The lie was bigger than I thought, but I was just getting started. I sat in the hotel room, still trembling from the encounter at the house. The silence of that living room, of my own father turning down the TV just enough to ignore me, echoed louder than any screaming match could have. My brother's smirk. My mother's apathy. They had erased me like I was never part of the story. Rachel called just as I was unpacking my laptop. Elle, she said softly, you need something concrete. Did your grandmother ever leave you anything? Paperwork? A letter? Proof of ownership? I opened my mouth to say no, but something stopped me. A memory flickered. I was 15. It was Christmas Eve. Clara had pulled me aside while the others were arguing over ham versus turkey. She'd taken my hands in hers and whispered, if they ever try to take what's yours, look where we used to store your Christmas gifts. Inside the vault, not under the tree. At the time, I thought she was being poetic. Cryptic in that way only grandmothers could be. Now I realized it wasn't a metaphor. I called the nearest branch of the old neighborhood bank. I didn't have an account there anymore, but I asked about safety deposit boxes in Clara Mendoza's name. The clerk was hesitant, but when I mentioned I had identification, that I was the direct descendant, she asked me to come in with documentation. When I arrived, the woman behind the counter, a younger girl named Marisol, looked surprised. Clara, used to come in every December, she said with a smile. Always brought us cookies. She verified my ID, matched it with records, and after a long pause, returned with a small brass key inside an envelope. Written on the outside, for Elena, only when she asks. The vault was cold, quiet, and smelled faintly of dust and steel. The box wasn't large, just big enough to hold a few documents and a folded piece of cloth. My hands were trembling. As I opened the lid, inside were 3 items, a copy of the original deed, with Clara's signature and mine. It had been notarized, certified, and filed properly 5 years ago, an official statement from the notary verifying the transfer of property into my name before Clara's death. A sealed envelope, labeled in Clara's handwriting, read this when they forget who you are. I broke the seal with care. Her handwriting danced across the page like it always had, firm, elegant, full of quiet defiance. Mi niña, you gave them the roof, but the foundation is still yours. Take it back, gently or not. I knew they would test you. I knew Daniel would feel entitled and your mother would stay silent. That's why I left this paper, and not just my words. You don't owe them the house. But if you ever want to claim it, don't let their noise drown your truth. I raised you stronger than that. Con todo mi amor, abuela. Tears blurred the ink as I folded the letter back into its envelope. I left the vault with the deed, the notary statement, and Clara's final blessing. Rachel called again as I stepped outside. Well? She asked breathlessly. I have it all. I said, the deed, her letter, everything. Rachel exhaled. Then it's time. And I knew she was right. It was time to stop grieving and start reclaiming. The first time I held the deed in my hands again, it felt like touching memory in physical form. Fragile, weighted, undeniable. My name, written in Clara's looping cursive beside her own, notarized, dated, sealed. It had been there all along, tucked safely away, waiting for me to stop running. Rachel flew in 2 days later. She stepped off the plane with a backpack, a binder, and that fire in her eyes that had never dimmed, not even when life tried. We took over the desk in my hotel, room like 2 women on a mission. I ran a handwriting overlay, she said, pointing to a page on her laptop. Look, this is your signature from the deed 5 years ago, and this is the one Daniel submitted with the sale documents. The loops on the M and Z, completely different. She didn't have to convince me, but it felt good to see. Proof on screen, not just in my gut. With her help, I retained a lawyer, Ms. Gaines, a sharp, methodical woman who specialized in real estate fraud. She took one look at the forged power of attorney and said, "We can work with this. With the deed, the notary's letter, and your financial history paying taxes on the property, we can prove fraud. And silence," she added, tapping the file, "isn't consent." I breathed for what felt like the first time in weeks. The lawsuit was filed the next morning. We named Daniel and the developers, demanding a temporary injunction to stop construction. The judge granted it within 48 hours. That was the moment everything shifted. Headlines popped up. Daughter fights back after brother sells inherited home without her knowledge. Forged signature, legal battle heats up over family property. Daniel called me once. I didn't answer. He left no voicemail, just silence, the kind that used to scare me. But not anymore. When the court date arrived, I walked into the building, flanked by Rachel on one side and Ms. Gaines on the other. My parents didn't show. I wasn't surprised. Daniel sat across from me in a stiff suit, his jaw tight, his eyes full of fury masked as indifference. I didn't bother looking away. The hearing room was packed. Reporters, locals, even a few of Clara's old neighbors who'd remembered her kindness and wanted to see how this played out. A storm had been forecast outside, and the sky rumbled. As we began, Ms. Gaines led the opening. She laid it all out: fraudulent signature, expired power of attorney, lack of consent, tax payment records, and the deed Clara had signed with me. Then came the time for me to speak. I stood up, heart pounding. I hadn't planned on saying anything, but as I looked around the room, I saw the doubt in some eyes. And I thought of Clara. So I spoke. "I didn't leave because I stopped caring," I said, voice steady. "I left because I cared too much to keep fighting, because grief consumed everything after my grandmother passed, because I trusted that my family, my own brother, would honor her wishes and mine." I glanced at Daniel. His eyes narrowed. "I didn't change my name. I didn't sell the house. I paid taxes on it, year after year, without asking for recognition, because I believed this house held our story, our legacy, not just bricks, but belonging." I paused. But when that trust is broken, when your voice is forged, when your place is stolen, you don't stay silent. The room was still. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to reclaim the truth, to honor the woman who raised me, when no one else would. I sat back down, and the silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was full. Outside, the rain began to fall, and I knew the storm had broken, not just over the courthouse, but over every lie I'd been told to swallow. And this time, I wasn't the one drowning. The judge's words echoed like bells through the courtroom. "The sale is hereby nullified due to forged authorization and lack of legal consent by the rightful co-owner, Elena Martinez. Title of the property is to be reinstated in her name, immediately." Daniel didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. He just sat there, stone-faced, jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. He'd gambled everything: his reputation, his charm, his entitlement, and lost it all in a courtroom full of strangers. My parents weren't present. Not during the ruling, not before, not after. They never called, never texted. They disappeared, the same way they had emotionally years ago, quietly, deliberately. Like cowards hiding behind wallpaper. When we walked out into the light rain, Rachel was already smiling. "That was incredible," she said, slipping her arm through mine. "How does it feel?" I paused, taking in the soft drizzle, the smell of concrete after rain, the old courthouse steps beneath my shoes. I'd imagined this moment so many times, storming back, demanding justice, taking the house with a triumphant grin. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt released. 2 days. Later, I stood on the now vacant land that used to be Clara's home. The demolition plans had never gone through, thank God. The jasmine vines were still clinging to the broken fence like they were trying to hold the house in place. Ghosts of memories danced in the empty yard. My grandmother's voice, the creak of the porch swing, laughter under the fig tree. I could have restored it. Could have renovated and moved back in, forced my parents out, made them see what they'd thrown away. But that wasn't the legacy Clara would have wanted. So I made a different choice. I called a nonprofit I'd worked with before, an organization that provided safe housing for elderly women with no family to rely on. Women like Clara would have been had she not had me. I offered them the land, the structure, the blessing, on one condition: the home would bear her name, Clara's house. Rachel helped me draft the paperwork. My lawyer smiled when she read it. "You're giving it away?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'm giving it forward." The news spread quickly. Some were confused. Others were inspired. But no one could deny the symbolism. The girl they tried to erase had carved her name into something permanent. Daniel tried to call me. I didn't answer. When I visited the site again for the dedication ceremony, a small crowd had gathered. There was no podium, no ribbon, just a plaque in the garden. Clara's house, for women who were once forgotten. My parents didn't show up. Rachel leaned over and whispered, "You didn't just win the house. You rewrote the story." I smiled, blinking back tears. "Yes," I said quietly. "And this time, no one else gets the pen." It was spring when I returned. The jasmine had bloomed again, curling through the fence like it always had, stubborn and wild. But the gate was new, fresh wood, clean iron hinges, and a simple bronze plaque mounted at eye level. Clara's legacy home, for those left behind. I ran my fingers across the letters, not for ownership, for remembrance. Inside, everything had changed, but the spirit remained. Soft painted walls, wide open halls, rocking chairs on the porch. Laughter echoed faintly from the kitchen where volunteers prepped tea. An elderly woman sat by the window, humming a tune I couldn't place. She smiled at me like I'd always belonged, and maybe, in some way, I did. Rachel met me by the front door, clipboard in hand. "The first 2 residents moved in last week," she said. One of them cried when she saw her name on the welcome basket. We stood in silence for a moment, letting the peace settle. "I never thought this would be the ending," I whispered. Rachel bumped her shoulder gently against mine. "It's not an ending, just a better beginning." I nodded, remembering Clara's voice in my head, steady and full of light. "The house isn't the gift, you are." I looked at the building once more, not as a battleground, not as a monument to what was taken, but as something reborn. And then, with quiet certainty, I stepped forward. For the first time in years, I walked through the front door of my grandmother's house, on my terms, with my name, and no one left to take it from me.